Morning, guys. Hope you're having a good Sunday morning so far. I thought I'd jump on real quick and give everyone an update on what's happening in the tropics. This is for August 27th of 2023. By the way, if you didn't know, I've got an app. You should download it. I'm biased. I think it's great. I think you will too, though. I don't think that I'm too crazy here. Big picture shows that we still have Tropical Depression 10 in the Caribbean and / Gulf of Mexico. We've got Franklin out there in the open Atlantic, and then we've got another wave that's coming off of the coast of Africa over the next couple of days. I want to start with Franklin, which is going to be turning out to sea. It's been kind of spinning around out there for a couple of days, kind of waffling back and forth. First it was going west, then it was going back to the east, and eventually this thing's going to turn back around and head off to the northwest and then back around to the northeast. Of course, right now moving off to the northwest at a handful of miles an hour. But the real guy that everyone cares about is Tropical Depression 10. So I want to spend some time on this one. As of 7 a.m., 7 a.m. advisory, this is actually a little farther off to the south from what you see here. Which is interesting because overnight last night it actually really took a trek off to the south. You can see the current satellite imagery of it shows that it seems to have a reasonable circulation right where it was, but if you really get in there, you can see the 7 a.m. update here. You can see how the forecast hasn't really changed, which is why it doesn't necessarily matter that one's the 4 a.m. and one's the 7 a.m. because... yeah, but the interesting thing, that what has changed, is the 12-hour forecast. The forecast from yesterday afternoon at 4 o'clock. For 4 a.m. this morning is the top guy over here. Is this one right in here. Where it actually was at 4 a.m. was kind of down over here, and where it actually is right now is even farther off to the south here. And this is why when you have tropical depressions and not tropical storms, big giant hurricanes, these become a little more difficult to forecast because the center on these can kind of zip around. You'll have a center over here, but with land interaction like this, the center will go from here to down here, or from here to up here, because it's interacting with the land features. So I'll say that, it complicates things, and so the forecast that you see here, as much as I wish I could say, oh, this is the forecast and it's not going to change, I tend to think that it will, not only because we don't necessarily have a good beat on where that center is going to end up, but also because this upper level low that is shown on satellite in the lower level, the mid level, and the upper level is not really in the model guidance, which is also not good. And so we've got the center of the storm, which isn't where it was anticipated to be as little as 12 hours ago. We've got an upper level low, mid level low, lower level low. It's basically a stacked tut low. Meteorologists don't get angry that I just used that term. Hanging out across parts of South Mississippi, and it's just not there in the guidance. You can see it in the upper levels very loosely on the left here, but when you look on the right, 500 millibars, I mean, that's still 18,000 feet. When you go back to here, lower level, mid level, upper level, you can see the spin in here all the way down to the lower levels, and even in the mid levels, it's not showing up in the model guidance, and that's going to be problematic for a couple of different reasons. Number one, if that's there, and 10 is down here, and this moves north, and this continues to move to the south, like we're seeing this morning, they're going to end up doing a little dance. You're gonna kind of spin this direction, and then back this direction, you spin this direction. So they deflect and then they wrap back around when they run into each other, and so what you're going to end up with, if this lifts off to the north and if this upper level low continues to sag to the south, you're going to deflect and then wrap back around, which means that 10 may end up, and this may be part of the reason that it's pushed to the south a little farther, because the little ridge of high pressure that's over here continues to kind of shove the trough here that was in place a little farther off to the south. But this may dig to the south and then kind of slide a little more east and then back to the west and then back to the northeast again. The other interesting thing in the model guidance this morning is this sweeping trough that is supposed to pick 10 up according to sources and take 10 off to the northeast so that it doesn't bother the Florida Panhandle, Alabama, Mississippi, or Louisiana. While the official forecast from the NHC is unchanged, and I tend to always lean on their expertise, I will say that if you look from the ensemble guidance and into just some of the operational guidance, and I don't like to take operational guidance as gospel by any means, but it is interesting to see that both the GFS and the Euro operational guidance are doing a similar thing. So instead of this sweeping trough that comes across, you end up with this trough that kind of pinches down into the Gulf, but then things turn a little more northerly a little bit quicker. So 10 is down here, Imelda or Idalia or whatever it's going to be called, is going to be lifting to the north. And notice that there's a little bit of a shove. We've got one shove that goes off to the east and then another one that shoves back off to the west. And there is still an avenue that this ends up making landfall farther west than where it is right now. If you look at the operational guidance. Now, we can look at some of the other guidance, and we can see a trend in the same direction, though not quite as exaggerated or robust. The 0Z guidance here, notice how this is kind of a sweeping turn to the right, a sweeping turn to the east, and you had a couple camps in here. You had 1 camp, 2 camp, 3 camps, right? You had the 1 camp that was going to slide it east first, and then kind of sweep it around, another one that just kind of goes north and then turns, and then one that actually went like north-northwest and then back around to the east. And at 6Z, now everything's kind of, there's still 3 camps. You got to look close, but there's still 3 camps in here. But now almost everything is saying, okay, we're going to go mostly north first, and then we're going to kick back off to the east. And so your turn is less sweeping, and it's a little more sharp. It's subtle, but it's certainly there, which is why I tend to think that everyone from Mobile to Miami still needs to kind of stay alert on this one. Louisiana landfall is less likely, I think, but I don't know that... I don't think it's going to happen. I don't know that we can completely rule it out, but I think the chance is down below 1%. Texas, you can watch from a distance. You're sitting on the bench on this one. But I tend to think that the entire spine of the peninsula of Florida will probably see impacts from this. A lot of these CAG borne systems tend to be kind of one-sided and they have an eastern edge, or an eastern side, I should say, that is much more robust than the west side. So the next thing that is worth talking about real quick before I move on. So I think that the Big Bend region is probably in play. No matter where this thing goes, you folks are going to see impacts from this. As you go farther down the peninsula, I think you get fewer and fewer impacts. And as I said, until Miami should care, and Miami's not necessarily in the yellow, but I think that's still true. Mobile in the yellow on the other side, because we got to cover if this thing goes more northerly and maybe makes landfall somewhere near Destin. You're still going to be on the west side of this thing, in Mobile and maybe even parts of eastern Mississippi. You're not going to get big impacts from this, but you'll probably still get a little bit of rain and a little bit of wind. The next guy is the next wave coming off the coast of Africa. This isn't necessarily going to bother anybody, but I wanted to talk about this real quick just in case you guys see stuff and say, oh, well, great, another one. Here we go again. And it's, this one's probably not going to be as big of a deal. So there's your update for August 27th of 2023. If needed, I'll jump back on and give you guys an update coming up later this afternoon.